Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by cityCURRENT and brought to you by Lipscomb and Pitts Insurance. This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are giving back and making a difference so we can learn and do the same. We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose. Now here's our host, the CEO of cityCURRENT, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast produced by cityCURRENT. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We've got a special treat for you when you talk about a personal dive and someone being willing to open up and share her story of overcoming adversity and facing drug and alcoholism and addiction. It's a powerful story, but I think something that, one, we will definitely all learn from, and two, for those who are struggling with this is a powerful opportunity to see that there is light through the darkness. So we're joined by my good friend, someone I've known for more than 12 years, who's seen cityCURRENT go through all of its iterations. So she's been on a personal journey with us. But Kellie Turnage, how are you doing?
Oh, hey, Jeremy. I'm great today. Thank you so much. Being vulnerable is oftentimes hard for many of us, but I'm hoping that by letting my guard down, it'll be helpful to other people who are struggling, because I've been there. I know what it's like.
Let's start with a little bit of just, where you grew up and give us a little bit of your childhood.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy. Well, I'm originally from Florence, Alabama, Northwest Alabama, if you've never heard of it. But we moved to Memphis when I was young, maybe one. So probably 81 when I was one. I'll be 40 in 6 months. So I grew up in this. I grew up in this little Poplar 240 bubble. Everything we did was pretty much within a mile of there. We lived in Kirby Woods and went to first to band. I went to breakfast, kindergarten through 12th grade at the old campus where High Point is now, and was involved in gymnastics at Lausanne. So everything was pretty much kind of right here in my little bubble. And I loved it. Someone asked me recently if I regret growing up in a bubble. And I thought it was funny she asked it like that, but she doesn't know my story. And so I just said, you know what? It was part of the plan. I don't regret it.
Well, I love the fact that your outlook is everything is part of the plan. And we'll talk about that in a second. But carry that forward on your end. When you talk about just growing up and family traditions, give us a couple of family traditions that stand out to you.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. My mom asked us, I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and so my sisters are 4 and 8 years younger. And she had asked us this recently. She wanted to have this recorded somewhere of what our favorite traditions were. We had some great ones, but I think the ones that I treasure the most are the ones that were just, we had dinner together every night as a family. We went on some neat vacations, the Disney Worlds and the Pickwick and skiing and, what a lot of people from Memphis do. But we had a great childhood. We really did. Mom and Dad had an environment for us that we grew up in that was safe, and I felt very loved. My parents have a good relationship. They'll be married 50 years next year, which I think is just awesome. So, I was definitely not the one growing up that anyone would have said at a young age, oh, yeah, you better watch out for her. Things didn't happen till a little later for me.
When you look at your parents, that will be married for 50 years coming up, which is awesome, what's something that you kind of look at them and say, I want to take some of those traits or lessons that they've learned and that you're trying to apply to your own life being married on your end with a family?
I am. I'm married and have 3 stepchildren and 2 dogs and lots of nieces and nephews. So my life is very full now. And, you really have to plan that time. Life gets so busy. And I think one of the things during this pandemic that I have really, really thought so much about is just how important relationships are, because we are able to, for the most part, most of us are able to spend a little more time fostering those relationships, but they'll pass by if we don't plan the time. My husband and I celebrate our 4-year first date today. And so those are the little things that we're going to time to do, dinner just tonight. And my parents still had that. They still fostered that, being in love with your best friend and setting a good example for the kids. That sounds cliche, but I want them to know that this is a safe place and that there's a lot of love, because people don't grow where they're informed. They grow where they're loved. And I read a book recently by Bob Goff. I just fell in love with his books. Love Does and Everybody Always. And it really changed my perspective on things. It was just love. Let God take care of the rest of it. Love everybody always. And so I just hope that one day we can look back and say that we fostered an environment of love. Because I know that's where I grew up, is an environment of love.
Well, and I think that's something for all of us as parents that we want to be able to emulate and provide for our children, is a family that's nurturing but full of love, just like you say. Talk about gymnastics, because I know this was something that was a great experience, but also you had a negative with it as well. So talk about gymnastics.
Right. So all three girls, a very strong-willed child, very stubborn, competitive, get out of my way or you'll be part of the bay. I'm going to do it my way or the highway. So at 12, mind you, this was 91, 92. This was World Wide Web. This was pre-Facebook. This was just my gymnastics coach said to me, if you want to be number one, number 2, 3, I was, you need to be as thin as she is. And it really thrust me into a full-fledged addiction. Really is where we started seeing my addiction come out, because I became anorexic pretty quickly and struggled with that for many, many years. And
was that something that your parents saw? Were you open with them about it? Or was that something that you kept inside and didn't tell anyone?
Well, right. It, physically, they knew what was going on. And they took gymnastics and got me into some help for that. But they saw it pretty early on. I was in denial, just my drug and alcohol addiction. I was in denial until the very bitter end. So, and I didn't even really didn't trace addiction back to that point in life. But that's really where hard things started happening.
Well, and I think at an early age, as a young girl, you don't realize when a coach who you look up to, who you think is going to provide these opportunities and who knows what you think is best, gives you that sort of feedback and advice, you take that to heart. And it's like, wait a second, I'm not good enough unless I have this weight or unless I look like this. And it really does, I think, damage not only your self-esteem, but it puts you on a very negative trajectory in terms of the way you view yourself and what you deem is your ability to reach your goals.
Right. And
I think many times we don't realize the disservice, especially as coaches, that we're doing children by doing that. And then that puts you on a destructive cycle. And that's an unintended probably deal for the coach. Like, I'm sure they didn't necessarily mean to put you on that trajectory, but the reality is by saying those words, it does.
It does. And what it taught me from that age is that, because we all experience things where we want to change the way we feel. And what are we going to do to change the way we feel? When we're scared, when we're anxious, when we're angry, we want to take control. We want to change the way we feel. And for me, how I've changed the way I feel is by doing very destructive things to my body. And that has carried along for, because of course, even sober 4 years now, I still have time all the time where I want to escape the way I feel. But now I have tools where I don't have to pick up a drink or a drug or not eat.
And I think that's something, because I'm always cautious of, it's not like anyone is ever through the finish line with it. Like when you talk about anything, whether it's ADD, ADHD, when you talk about dyslexia, when you talk about any disability or challenge that you face, it carries with you. It's a part of you. It doesn't define you by any imagination, but it's something that it's not like, oh, well, I'm magically, everything is just better. Like you deal with this and it's a struggle, and it's an ongoing ability to overcome that. And like you said, choose, instead of destructive things, positive things that will help you to kind of move in that direction. And so I want to kind of get to that a little later, but talk about you in college and then professionally, because I think you move away for a while to Texas. So carry that story a little bit forward in terms of you going into college and then graduating and getting into the corporate world?
Sure, absolutely. So I graduated. My high school years were actually pretty healthy. Gained some weight back to good. It's probably the best way I'd describe it. I don't think I was in recovery per se from having an eating disorder, but I think I had gotten back to good enough that I could go to college. And so I went to Auburn because you had asked me earlier what some of my favorite family traditions are, but my dad had taken each of us girls out to J.H. Ranch in California growing up for a father-daughter camp. And it's still my favorite memory with my dad is during that camp, but they recruit a lot of people out there to work. Their headquarters is in Birmingham. So they recruit a lot of people to work out there from Auburn and Alabama. So I just fell in love with these counselors. It was like, I'm going to Auburn. This is where I'm going. And really just had a great experience there. They were some of the healthiest years of my life. I guess I'd be described as a goody two shoes. I didn't know what I didn't know. I really didn't. I wasn't drinking or anything at that point, and just surrounded myself with girls who were like me, or I was like them, whichever one it is. But I didn't know what I didn't know. I was, I really was in love with my faith and believed that God had a plan for my life. I just thought it would be what I wanted it to be, which looked like getting married out of college and living life happy ever after. And fortunately, God knew He had a different story written for me. And it wasn't a story that I could have ever written, but it doesn't really matter at this point now because I've come to peace in terms with the fact that all those things that happened led me to where I am now. Yeah. And that's what gives me serenity, but that's now. That wasn't then. So I graduated from college and I got married to the guy that I wanted to marry in college. And we were not married very long. And we got divorced, and it was pretty tragic. It was pretty traumatic. I had started drinking pretty heavily around that time. And
was that as a way to kind of cope with what you were going through? Was that part of it?
Yeah, kind of. I was, we were living in Birmingham, and I was sexually assaulted by a physician in Birmingham. And it was right about then that I really wanted to escape not only Birmingham, but escape the way I was feeling. I didn't tell anybody, which is pretty common for people who have been sexually assaulted. You're ashamed, you're full of guilt. And I turned to alcohol, and an alcoholic was born. I mean, I remember us going down to Mardi Gras because my ex-husband's from Mobile. And he was like, this is a marathon weekend, not a foot race. You're not used to drinking, so let's pace yourself. And to this point in my life, I don't understand what the term pace yourself means. Like, they make mega rolls of toilet paper. Why do you buy the regular ones? Why buy a pint of ice cream if you're not going to finish it? So there's just this all or nothing mentality that I've always had. And things really got bad. That's when things really started getting dark. And I drank too much one night in the midst of this starting to drink a whole lot. This is the beginning of my alcoholism decade, and cheated on my husband. And it led to a really long, costly, horrible, tragic divorce. So it's part of my story. It's not anything I'm proud of, but yeah, that was really, things started changing. And I was in real estate. I was selling real estate and had gotten that after college, early 2000s. Anybody and everybody could buy a house, right? You just wrote on a piece of paper how much you made and hand it to your banker. And that's how, 22-year-olds like me got money to buy. I built my first house. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, I couldn't even do that now. So yeah, I tried to turn to real estate. We'd moved to Mobile, and it wasn't long after we got divorced that I was raped. And that, I remember, it was distinctly the time that I was thinking, I will do whatever it takes not to feel anything. And so because I'm an alcoholic, and because I've got this disease, because I've got allergy of the body to alcohol and this mental obsession that I can't have one drink. I can't have that. I can drink. Sure, I can drink all right. But that first drink, I can't have, because it gets the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And so I was a wild child. I really was. I was trying to work in restaurants and bars and couldn't hold down a job, and would wind up in sordid places, as we call the big book in recovery says. We'd wind up in sordid places. I didn't know where I was or how I got there. I was with. And those were some really, really dark years.
Did you have any friends that, either noticed or tried to help you? Were you kind of on your own going through this? Like, what was that process like on your end of just, were you totally isolated and alone, kind of managing through this and not really knowing? Were you somewhat aware, or did you have friends? Like, where did you fall on those spectrums of just kind of being on your own versus having people try to help? And did you feel like you kind of knew where you were, or it was all for nothing?
Well, the way I kind of describe it is there was Mobile, there was back to Memphis, and then there was Austin. And in Mobile, really just some dark years. I mean, I don't remember having any good friends. I remember it was really more party scene for me. Those last several years weren't like that. But
you're young. I mean, you're in your early 20s for the most part.
Yeah, mid
20s. Yeah, mid 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so I moved back to Memphis in 2010. This is where I was only here for 1 year. And this is where 2009, 2010, where you and I connected.
Yep.
And I worked for my dad for a little while. It was as bad as it was, because I really didn't come home very often. They knew something was going on, obviously, because when I'd come home, I'd wind up drunk, and they'd have to figure out a way to get me back to Mobile. So that's what, Memphis, I wanted, and that's the thing about alcoholics and addicts. I mean, they're all the same, right? Addicts are addicted to alcohol. Addiction is across the board addiction. So if I say addict or alcoholic, I mean the same thing. I wanted my life to get better. I was in debt up to my eyeballs. And my parents wanted to help, but they didn't know what to do. We didn't grow up in a where we had a lot of people who are recovering alcoholics. So they just thought, I've had some trauma. I need some help. Maybe counseling or maybe getting back into church would help.
Did they know about the rape and any of that? Were you forthright with them on any of that, or did you hide all that?
I hid all that.
Yeah.
I not only hid it, but I also lied about things. I lied about what really happened and the destruction of my marriage. And, since being poor, I had to work those 12 steps and make amends for some of the things that I've done wrong, which provides a lot of freedom. But you can't do that, the day you walk into recovery.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I think obviously this is a very, tough conversation to have, but I think it's so important, because I think people who are going through the darkness, like they need to know that others have gone through and have been through a lot of darkness themselves, and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But at the same time, like understanding, to your point, like you do want to get better, but many times like we don't know how to help as friends, as loved ones, as parents. Like there's a lot of this that's kind of wrapped up into these stories that I want to try to unpack a little bit, because I think you can offer a wealth of insight. So carry it forward on just what I would say is an extremely pivotal moment on my end, but there might have been some other ones before. So I'll give you the kind of the grace on telling the story, but of basically being in a coma. And so talk about kind of where this really culminates and where things start to make a pretty dramatic shift.
Right. Well, I had to make another geographical change. I couldn't stay in Memphis and keep living the life that had me. So in that strife, and I found a job in Austin. But unfortunately,
because you thought new city, start
that's
over.
That's right. I thought, I'll just start over somewhere else and tornado through another town. But I got a great job there, and once again thought this is a new start. And that's where I started having a lot of physical symptoms from drinking every day, and got hooked on pills. I mean, you name it. I had doctors writing me scripts for multiple things that I didn't need. So the combination of the alcohol and the pills and really whatever else I could get my hands on to change the way I was feeling, to not deal with the pain and the fear that I had in living.
So you're really trying to numb it. I mean, you basically just wanted to numb yourself.
I was numbing it. Oh my goodness gracious. And then just started having the physical symptoms. Anytime you do that to your body, you're going to. But my best friend, Sarah Walton, Sarah Pettit, we still call her grown-up friends by their maiden names. Sarah Walton, she and her husband moved to Austin in 2015. Mind you, I've had several interventions over the years, but still complete denial. I'm fine. Everything's good. I've got it under control, just going through a tough time. And I think that's why so many people didn't know how bad it really was, because if I met you for drinks, chances are I've already had a bottle before I get there. And another one. So people really didn't know how bad it was, but Sarah knew, she's grown up with me, and she came to me and said, Kellie, I can't watch this happen anymore. I was always black and blue from either a car falling down and hitting my head, or she said, you're going to have some help. I cannot sit back and watch this. And I thought, you know what? Ding, ding, ding. This is the time. I'm going to shut everybody else up and learn how to drink like normal people. Just still complete denial.
So you just thought it was like, I just have to cut back.
Yeah, like somebody's going to teach me.
Yeah, it's like instead of 10 drinks, I'm just going to have 2 and I'll be good. I'll just prove to them that I can do it. But it didn't dawn on you like, wait a second, I need to seriously stop.
Right. Yeah. Note to self, don't drink around those people anymore. They think you have a problem. It's just this compartmentalized life you lead.
Yeah.
And nobody really knows the real you throughout this whole thing, is what I'm looking back now, I know. So I came from treatment back to Austin and immediately got back to it. I mean, immediately. Was supposed to go to his funeral when I got back and didn't even go to the funeral. On my way there, got drunk. And it just, I was supposed to go back to work. Mind you, I'd been on medical leave for a while. I was supposed to go back to work. I'd kicked my mom out of my apartment because she'd come back to Austin with me because they're scared to death. I come out of treatment. I'm like, I'm good. I'm fine. Everything was good. Graduated with honors. And my mom, when she tells her story, my parents are very open about, this is a family story now. But she says, this is the point in time where I thought this is the last time I'm going to see my daughter alive.
Wow.
And
so they don't want to let go of you at that point because they don't. Yeah. I mean, that's, as a parent, you're like, there's a destructive cycle that could come. You don't want to lose that moment and to lose your child. Right.
And they had enabled of this over the years. So they say, by helping me with, digging me out of holes here and there, but they didn't know what they didn't know. Now they know. That kind of kept me sicker longer, but that's why we talk about our story, so we can help people.
Yeah. So share where the coma comes in. Really amazing conversation with the doctor as you coming out of the coma in terms of him telling you what happened and really kind of blowing the lid off of the reality that you're given a second chance. It's up to you.
Right.
A lot of these families I'm having to make organ donation conversations with, you're lucky and blessed, but this now is on you. And here are the health ramifications. Here's everything you're going to have to deal with. Talk about the coma and kind of how all this culminates.
Sure. So I was supposed to meet Sarah for lunch on March 9th. I don't remember much about my life from March 5th. I don't remember anything from March 5th until March 21st. Probably of that month. My life is just black because I was supposed to meet Sarah for lunch. I didn't show up for lunch on March 9th, and only a best friend, she came looking for me, and I didn't open my apartment door. She saw my car was there. She called 911 and had the paramedics bust down the door. And when they found me unresponsive in a coma on my bathroom floor. So, she panicked, obviously they couldn't tell her if I was alive or not because I'd been down for a while. And they rushed me to the hospital and put me on life support. And I stayed like that, as the doctor said, for days. I was in a coma for almost 2 weeks. And in the beginning, there wasn't a lot of hope. There's not a lot of brain activity. We're not sure where this is going to go. They wound up giving me a trach. So I have a trach scar, which reminds me every day of what God did in my life. But it was, I had no idea the impact on everyone else because I don't remember that. So when I came out of a coma, I was extremely disturbed. I was angry. We call this the mind of a chronic alcoholic. That I would come out of a coma and not be grateful I was alive, happy to see everybody. I was angry. I wanted to stay in Austin. I didn't want to go back to Memphis. Never mind the fact that I couldn't talk unless I put my hand over my hole in my neck. This would be where most earth people, as we call them, would say, oh my God, thank you so much, Lord, I'm alive. Like, help me. And my moment of clarity did not come at that moment. But I made it back to Memphis.
Yeah, and I think it was, your parents were there the whole time through.
Yeah.
And the doctor points that out. It's like they're by your side the whole way. And I think there's a lot of touching moments within that narrative. And at the same time, like I said, a lot of reality check as well that kind of put things in perspective. So when did it hit you, like you said, I'm coming out angry. When did it hit you of, wait a second, my life does need to change?
Yeah. So this is really where the story gets exciting because my parents, there's so many miracles that have happened since then, that was the one that catapulted the rest of the miracles. But my parents had a family friend who came to meet with me to Memphis because mom and dad are like, we don't know what in the world to do. And so she came in and I was still pretty belligerent. I didn't want to meet with her. I didn't want to be back in Memphis, but she shared her story with me of her experience and her strength and her hope and how she's been sober all these years. And it was the first time, Jeremy, that I can remember in my life literally saying, I can't do this on my own. I need help. And that's step one, admitting that you're powerless and that your life's unmanageable and that you need a help that's greater than you can do on your own. I've lost friends since I've been sober because they want to do it on their own. So that was the moment for me. We called it a spiritual awakening. Once I learned that's kind of what that was when I started working my steps and getting involved, in my 12-step recovery program. Because I got it. I jumped into a meeting and Dotsie sponsored me and I started going places and coming home and telling people that's where I went. That was actually where I went. Like it amazed me that I started telling the truth because I'd lived so many lies that I didn't even know how to tell the basic truth anymore. It was like learning to walk again.
How, when you look at kind of how you were able to kind of walk through that process and really find yourself again, what were some either moments of clarity, like you said, learning to walk again? What were some major ahas or even little ones that created a bigger aha? What were some things that kind of helped you? Because I think part of this too is baby steps where it's like building the confidence to say, I can do this. Like you said, I can't do it by myself, but I can do this. Mm-hmm. Talk about creating some momentum.
Right. Yeah, I remember distinctly driving past the liquor store at Poplar and Yates and picking up the phone and calling someone that's in the program with me and talking to them. And the anxiety subsided because even though I'd gone through all the DTM withdrawals when I was in a coma, but you still have to learn to live life having anxious moments without picking up a drink. And so that was new to me. I hadn't done that in 10 years. And so going to those meetings every day, I still go to meetings every day, sometimes two. And the myth I want to dispel that is most people think that recovering alcoholics get together in these dark, smoky rooms in the basement of churches and talk about how I'm struggling with having a drink today. I just want to have a drink today. And that's really not at all what it's like. I don't crave a drink or a drug anymore. Thankfully, that obsession has been lifted. And I'm not naive enough to think that it couldn't come back. But as long as I continue to work a program, meaning I go to my meetings, I work with my sponsor, I've done my 12 steps, which provides such a feeling of freedom because you've let go, you've let God, you've cleaned house, and then you try and help others. And getting out of yourself, help other people is really how you get out of self. You know what I mean? Like you know that because cityCURRENT provides such an incredible give back to the community. I mean, getting out of yourself to call somebody else or help somebody else, that didn't come immediately because I fell in love so quickly after I'd gotten sober and got married. And my husband's 15 years sober, which is amazing. But I kind of lived in a pink cloud for like a year, maybe even a year and a half. And then life settled in and I started panicking. I really did. I didn't know what to do with feelings because I'd numbed them for so long. And so if I got scared, I didn't know how to not panic. But now when just yesterday, I had a moment of fear and anxiety and I picked up the phone. I called my sponsor. She walked me through it, talked through it. Tell me what you're scared of. What is it you think that's getting this, and being able to have an army of people around me who love me no matter what. They help me. I'm able to, sponsor some women in the program now and being able to see their lives take transformation. I mean, That's to me been one of the most beautiful things, and being available to others. I have a real passion and purpose now because, like I said earlier, like I've made peace with the fact that it doesn't matter to me how it all happened. It's history. It's his story. As I say, it's like, did I drink myself into it? Was I born with it? Was it a lot of trauma? Was it a combination of all three? It doesn't matter. It all happened for a reason. And I feel like it's for a greater purpose now.
Well, and I think the hardest thing is opening up and sharing your story, especially with your friends. But yet that becomes the very thing that gives you the strength and them the strength to help you through.
Yeah.
And the purpose becomes your power. What advice would you give when you look at, like you said, the first step really is realizing that you can't do it by yourself. Mm-hmm. Let's take this in two parts. What would you give as advice for the person who is struggling with addiction, whether it's alcoholism, drugs, opioids? There's so many things right now that people are struggling with. What advice would you give them? Because, as you said, you're helping a lot of people right now using your story to help others come out of the darkness and find the light. What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. I get asked that quite a bit just because so many people struggle. Half of all Americans have either been affected by it in their own family or they themselves. I'm blown away at the people that I didn't know were in recovery that are in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or, other recovery programs in Memphis. They're everywhere. There are hundreds of meetings throughout the day, every single day of the week, including weekends and holidays. And those rooms are filled with people who are understanding. And that would be my first, find a meeting to go to. Some people need to go through detox. They need inpatient help. There are so many options, insurance or not, there are so many options of how to get someone into a detox program. I don't want to say most because I don't know what the statistics are, but a lot of people will go into an inpatient facility for a month or a few months. I know 2 people who are at a long-term facility right now down in Alabama for a year. And if you would have told me, beginning of 2016, you're going to go spend a year somewhere and learn how to not drink. I would have fought that tooth and nail, but knowing what I know now, it's hard to, in the midst of the blackness and the addiction, hard for people to see any sort of clarity or that someone else's advice would help them. But please ask for help. Call me. I know people, I can refer people to for treatment. Find an AA meeting or an NA meeting or a CA, there's an A meeting for whatever.
Yeah.
But the pandemic has caused addiction has quadrupled.
And that's where I think, you sharing your story right now is so timely and so helpful. What advice would you give for parents and loved ones and friends who are seeing this play out with a loved one or a friend and they want to help, but they don't know how or where or when or what to say? Like, what advice would you give them?
Well, I tell the story. I did an outpatient program for a few months after I came back to Memphis. It was every night. There was a guy that sat down beside me every night. His name was Chris. And I tell the story because Chris was an athlete. He was a football player at Ole Miss and grew up in a great family. He was a heroin addict. And we went through this outpatient together. And after 3 months, you get really close with these people. We left there, and I said, Chris, just come to a meeting. I'll come down to South Haven for a meeting. You can't do this on your own. You can't do this on your own. And he was like, I got it. You know, just young, good-looking guy with all the potential in the world in front of him. And we buried him 3 months later.
Wow.
From alcohol, not heroin. So I think there's a misconception. Oh, this heroin epidemic, the opioid epidemic. Alcohol kills people. Pills kill people. And his mom at the visitation hugged me so tight, and she said, do not let this go in vain. And I have a picture and a place I see it every day. And I tell that story for parents, people that have loved ones, because it's hard to love go through this. My parents help a lot of people. They're involved in Al-Anon, which is another great program for people. If the person that you love is going to get help or not. If they're in they're denial, they're not willing to help. I tend to wonder, are you footing all the bills for your child? Does that keep them kind of doing it? Because until you get to a place, we say rock bottom, but rock bottom is a feeling, not a place. Some people like me, it was a coma. For some people like my husband, it was looking in the mirror one day and realizing, I don't know that person that's staring back at me. So I'm not saying that loved ones are responsible for any of it. Because it does. But if they're not willing to help, man, it is so difficult. But my parents say they wish they would have, kind of let me get to bottom sooner, I guess is the best way to put it. It's harsh, but it's true.
Yeah, I was about to say, how do you reconcile that as a parent? Because I'm going back to when, your mom doesn't want to leave you in Austin because she's thinking that could be the last time that I see you.
Right.
And as a parent who, like I still remember our youngest, like as a little baby, even though now he's, almost 12 years old, you don't want to let go. And I think there's a part of this where as a parent, your natural instinct is to try to do anything and everything to help. And yet at your point, you're saying, no, let them hit rock bottom. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you love them, you let them go, like the bird analogy. But as a parent, that's really tough to do. So, how do you reconcile that in terms of trying to intervene and do everything you can to save their life because you don't want to lose them, but yet letting them hit rock bottom where you could lose them, but you could lose them forever?
You could. That's what this disease does.
Yeah.
That's what addiction does. It kills people. It kills people. I have a slew of funeral programs in the back of my Bible. And I keep them there because as a reminder, it is a tragedy. It is tragic what addiction does. And, that's hard. I don't have children of my own. So if people are watching this or listening and being like, well, she doesn't understand because she's not a parent. You see it all the time, though, in recovery. You see it I get calls all the time, and I love taking those calls. But it's like, at what point, they'll say, yeah, but they're going to die, or yeah, but they're going to lose the kids, or yeah, but they're going to, I know my parents, what they feared, they got to a place where what they feared more than mine was me having a drunk driving car accident and winding up in prison for the rest of my life. They did everything they could, everything in their power to help me. But until I was ready to get help, there was really not a whole lot they could do. I was 36 years old. So yeah. They had to let it go and let God take care of that. Because it's so tragic what addiction does, Jeremy. It's so tragic.
How has this changed you? Like for the better? For the better.
Yeah.
Like, how have you come out of this as a stronger, better person? How do you look at this as, and like you said, it's history, it's his story. I think obviously it's brought you closer to God. It's made your faith more real.
For sure.
But what has this done for you in a positive way of changing your life and your outlook?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is it's given me compassion for people. It's given me a love for people that I did not have. I was extremely judgmental, self-righteous, thought my way was the right way, kind of lived in this world of, I don't even know the best way to describe it, Jeremy, but this being sober does give me love. It has allowed me to learn how to love others better. And it's amazing to love people without strings attached, without any expectations of what they're going to do for me, or, if they're going to help me with business, or they're going to, that doesn't matter to me anymore. And it's given me purpose. It's given me purpose that, I know that my life was saved for a reason. And it's given me a passion, to share this with other people. And it's a difficult story to share, but you talk to anybody that gets sober, none of us come in here on a winning streak, Most of us are at a hard place. They've lost kids, they've gone bankrupt, they've had, all kinds of stuff happen. I mean, the stories are endless, and those things still happen in sobriety. Just because I got sober doesn't mean all of a sudden life is good. Life is still the same, but I'm learning and will continue learning as long as I continue growing and being teachable. That was not humility and responsibility are two words that they've always been hard for me. I still struggle with them, but I'm learning.
We'll switch over and do a lightning round in a second where we just ask you fun kind of questions just to get to know you personally. So short question, short answer. But I'm curious, what's the best or your favorite, I don't want to say the best, but what's your favorite advice or the first bit of advice that comes to mind that was really helpful for you? So someone kind of offering a nugget of advice, and it could be related to the journey through or not, but just what's something that's kind of you've held on to as a bit of advice that's really helped you?
Right. The first quote that comes to mind that I remember is that God didn't rescue me from the ocean to let me drown in the bathtub. Like, things in perspective, even during a global pandemic, God wants to take me home by means of the coronavirus, then it's time for me to go. But so it does keep things into perspective. There's a lot of little in recovery. First things first, let go and let God. They're all like cute little things to say, and they're true. But gosh, Jeremy, that's a good one. The serenity, that's another really good learning that I can't control anything. All I can do is left foot, right foot, left foot, like
daily steps move you forward.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch over and do the lightning round. These are just short questions, short answers. So what's, you kind of mentioned it before, but what's a recent book you've been reading?
I'm reading Wild at Heart right now, the old book by John Eldridge that I read in college, Discovering Soul. I just think it's a great book. I'm so many guys in my life. I've got 2 stepsons. One's 14, one's 20. Obviously my husband, my dad, I've got 5 nephews. And sometimes I wonder, we are so different, and remembering how God made men, this wild, dangerous, passionate soul that is looking for a battle fight and a war to be won and a damsel to capture and captivate. It's, it reminds me that, we're different for a reason.
Well, you summed up guys pretty well, so that's good. Talk about a recent either TV show or a movie, something that puts a smile on your face on that side.
Oh gosh. We haven't really watched as much TV as I thought we would during this. My husband and I have both been kind of busy with work, but we did watch Bloodlines, and it really, I don't know if it put a smile on my face. It was pretty dark, but it did give me the assurance that all families have secrets. The old, my favorite quote from the movie For Christmases, which really is one of my favorite movies. And Vaughn says, well, you can't spell families without lies. And I love that. It's so true. We all have these little shields we put on because we don't want people to know our secrets. And you know what? It's okay because we all have them.
That's funny. That's a good line.
We just finished that series. But we watch a lot of the same ones that other people do now, the Datelines, the, murder mystery kind of things.
So what do you like to do to relax?
Yoga. I do a lot of yoga. It helps me. So one mentioned, I talked about that first year and a half, 2 years. Year 3, started having a lot of chronic pain, and that was really difficult. And I had to pull back on a lot of the things that make me happy physically. I pulled back on exercise, trying to figure out why my back and head was going through all these doctor's appointments. I wanted to escape the way I feel. Couldn't take anything that, would mess with my sobriety. And it was a really hard, difficult, it really was. 2000 was a difficult year, but it made me treasure, I'm getting back into it now. I feel better and I'm practice my yoga. Sometimes you got to be stripped to those things in order to realize that you can't control your body, really. I mean, we all have these great healthy aspirations, but Bess told me one time that, do you keep bottles in your closet? No, Pat, of course I don't keep bottles in my closet. She said, then why do you keep scales there? Basically saying like, let go of the control. And so I feel like that's what it did for me last year is I really got to know myself better.
What is on your end a favorite place to vacation, either with your husband and your family or with your parents? What's a favorite vacation spot?
Well, the most amazing place was where my husband and I went vacation, our honeymoon down in Numbie Bay off the coast of Antigua. We spent too much money on it, and it was well worth it. I mean, they're still the best memories ever. But we only got married 3 years ago, so they're still pretty new memories. But I love being at the beach. I mean, you put me in front of an ocean, bury me. Like, I am so happy when I'm at the beach. And my sponsor has a beach house, so she just use her condo quite. So that's where we go, the two of us at least.
Give me one, you already kind of mentioned it, but one either just favorite quote or bit of inspiration that really inspires you.
Oh, goodness, Jeremy. The one that I've told you, I think this is probably a Bob Goff quote, but it says, love isn't something we fall into, it is something we become. 2 things define you. Define patience, have nothing, and your attitude when you have everything.
Yeah.
Of course, I have a lot, Bible verses that I love and things like that. But it's fun to have a love for reading again and being and listening to people share their stories. I don't know, being present. It's amazing. I spent 36 years of my life not being present in life. And to look eyeball to eyeball, kneecap to kneecap with someone, talk to them and be present. It's my favorite thing. I love it. One-on-one. I love that time.
What do you hope your legacy is many, many years from now? Because obviously you're still creating it every single day and you're helping so many people. But when you look back many years from now, what do you hope that people say about you?
Oh gosh, Jeremy, legacy is a funny word. If people say that I loved them well, I cared about them, like, how well did you love my people? And it not be that, I wanted to leave this incredible business legacy and financial legacy and be known for doing all these things. And if all I do in life is just love my people well, it's been the greatest joy. I've accomplished it all.
I think that's the beauty of maturity and perspective is you start realizing what's most important. So very well said. Wrap up and talk about, just for those who want to get in touch with you and kind of follow your story, where do we go? So whether it's an email, a website, a phone number, where would you direct us just to be in touch with you?
I'm easy to get a hold of, Jeremy, and you can share my cell phone number. I don't mind it, but it's 901-690-6287. I am easy to find. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, and my email address is kellieedmundson@gmail.com. I've shared my story a lot publicly, but I've shared it more in like the recovery world, or in I don't know if you heard this really loud noise that just happened at the top of my stairs. I have a Great Dane, and it sounds like a bear when he yawns. But I have gotten the opportunity to share my story a lot, but I've not ever shared it in a business type setting before. And though I don't always think of CityCURRENT as just business, because I'm friends with y'all, I'm friends with the people that are members. I've been a member of CityCURRENT for a really long time and love it. But I've not shared it in this environment before. So I was a little nervous, but not nervous because of what you think about me, because I really don't care. Nervous just that, you get anxious talking about yourself. It's easy to talk about other people.
Well, but I will say, though, that, and this is what I've found to be true, and so many others that I have the chance to interview and talk with, is at first it is intimidating and it is scary putting yourself out there. And especially when you're talking about things that you wouldn't necessarily put out on Instagram. It's not the glitzy, glamorous side. It's the dark side. It's the struggles, right? And it's the things that don't paint the prettiest picture. But yet those are the things that all of us are struggling through. And that's the human side of this experience and this experience together. And you realize that so many, whether you see, and somebody else kind of painted the picture, I guess, in a better way, is that we all have prisons, whether they're physical or mental. And in many cases, you see those with a disability like a wheelchair, and you realize that they are physically captive, but that doesn't limit them in terms of what their ability is, right? But there's so many people who walk around, whether it's spiritually or mentally, captive. And you can't see that on the outside, but inside they're hurting. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the part of just the more you share your story, the more that we all share our stories, right, the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
It makes us more human. It draws us together, but it also gives us permission. And others who are struggling, they don't feel like they have permission until somebody like you steps out and says, let me lead this conversation.
Yeah.
Let me tell you where I've been. Mm-hmm. Now they have permission to share. Absolutely. And I feel like that's where the real power of purpose lies, is not just in sharing your story and your lessons, but literally in sharing your story and your lessons, because now it gives somebody else permission to open up.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, to me, the part of this is that this will be a really powerful way for you to share his story, the history, but to really have a very powerful purpose in the future to help so many like you already are. Right. And I think that's where this is a really different ChangeMakers podcast, but also a very powerful ChangeMakers podcast for that reason, because so many people need to hear this. So absolutely. Thank you, Kellie, for sharing your story.
The message.
Well, we appreciate all you do, not only here in our community, but, like you said, helping so many people with what they're dealing with. And you are being a light for so many people that are going through darkness. And we love you. We appreciate you. We appreciate you being a part of CityCURRENT, obviously. But thank you for coming on the ChangeMakers podcast. You are a change maker, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I love y'all too. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by CityCURRENT and brought to you by Lipscomb and Pitts Insurance. To learn more about our guests and share your stories of others leading by example, visit us online at citycurrent.com or follow us on social media using @CityCURRENT. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen. Now, think big, start small, and act now. Be a change maker.